Day 32, the darkness. Three words summarize our week of going into the darkness: relate, see, and smile. Relate. Saint Therese doesn't always make a good first impression. In fact, I've often heard that when people first meet her in writings, they think, I can't relate to her. They say, what do I have in common with a girl who grew up in a sheltered home, lived in a cloistered convent, and died at just 24 years old? But then, as they get to know her more and more, they'll often say, I relate to her more than any other saint. So, why do people relate so much to someone who on the surface seems difficult to relate to? I think it's because, even though she apparently never committed a mortal sin, she was absolutely convinced that had God not sheltered her from an early age, she would have been a big sinner. And we believe her. We believe her particularly when she tells us that even if she had been a bigger sinner than we are, even if she had committed all the sins that could be committed, I would go, my heart broken with sorrow, and throw myself into Jesus' arms, for I know how much he loves the prodigal child who returns to him. Somehow we relate to all that, or at least we want to. We relate to Therese because she's real, because she's not a plaster statue high on a pedestal. In fact, we get the sense that she's right down here in the grittiness of ordinary life with the rest of us. Speaking of ordinary life, we can also relate to Therese's ordinariness. During her life, she wasn't famous or well known. Indeed, her time in the convent truly was a hidden life full of the daily darkness we all experience. Yes, she's a great saint, but her standout sanctity is that she did little things with great love. Yes, in the midst of an ordinary, mundane life, she had extraordinary faith, hope, and love that are accessible to all of us. As she herself put it, why would this treasure not be yours? Finally, we relate to Therese's double darkness. In other words, like most of us, she not only knew herself to be weak and imperfect, but she knew what it was like to live in an age of secularism and doubt. And she knew it not because she actually lived in that world, but rather because the Lord allowed her to feel that God doesn't exist and that there isn't a heaven. That was her night of faith. Still, in the midst of such darkness, she clung to the Lord with faith, hope, and love, and encourages us to do the same. C. Therese solves the mystery as to why the great saints see themselves as great sinners. She also solves the mystery as to why so many sinners are often so blind to the fact that they're sinners. It has to do with the reality of God's love, his burning, passionate, infinite love. Because great saints clearly see this reality, they're not blind to their sins. Because people who don't think they're sinners don't clearly see the reality of God's love. They're blind to their sins. But if they did see the reality of his love, their eyes would be open to their sinfulness. To put it differently, Therese teaches us that when we clearly see the reality of God's passionate love for us, it makes us realize we can't compete. It reveals that we can compare God's infinite love for us. It reveals that when we compare God's infinite love for us with our own pitiful love for him, our love is really nothing. But Therese doesn't leave us hanging. She tells us that God's love for us is so great that he allows us to borrow his own love. Now, according to Therese, we don't fully borrow the Lord's perfect love until we get to heaven. By heaven, I mean both heaven, where we go when we die, and heaven on earth, where we go on Sundays. Of course, regarding that latter heaven, I'm talking about the Mass, which is where we can love God the Father through, with, and in the Son's own perfect love, and even see that love in the sacrament. Smile. Remember Therese's smile at her death. Let it be a sign for you. As Abraham had the stars and Mary had the words of Elizabeth, you have Therese's smile. So, in times of darkness, when you're tempted to discouragement because of your own weakness, poverty, and sin, remember that smile. In times of darkness, when you're tempted to think that God and heaven do not exist, remember that smile. In times of darkness, when you're tempted to think there's no way you can become a saint, remember that smile. And actually, Therese is smiling at you now. With her prayers, she's preparing your heart to accept the gift of the offering to merciful love. She's telling you not to be afraid. She's saying, I do not regret having offered myself to love, and neither will you. So get ready. The day of your offering is just around the corner. All that rejected mercy will soon be yours. So don't forget to smile. For today's prayer, spend the day pondering the offering to merciful love as it is summarized in these 3 words: relate, see, and smile.